For more, let's bring in former Republican Arkansas governor and former presidential candidate Mike Huckabee. Mike, you just heard what I think about it. What did you think about last night?
The whole speech was dark. The words were dark. The setting was dark. I really looked at it and I thought, my gosh, who wrote this and came up with the venue? Satan? It was just that kind of speech, David, that was frankly kind of blood-curdling. I've never seen a U.S. president in all my life, and I go back to Eisenhower in terms of remembering presidents. I've never seen a president use the presidential seal and the authority of the office to give such a just incredibly divisive speech and accuse 74 million Americans, half the country, of being evil. Not just saying, you guys disagree, your ideas aren't as good as mine, but to say we're enemies of democracy. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. The image of those Marines standing there at attention through all of that was, to use a word from Hillary, it was deplorable.
You know, I am from a Marine family. My son's been in a couple of wars fighting for the Marines. I mean, I know Marines pretty well, and I happen to know for a fact that a lot of them don't have a respect for this administration. And I even, those poor guys that were forced to stand there because that is their duty to honor the commander-in-chief the way they did, but to realize that what they were doing was being used to back up with force these ideas of calling out half of America as traitors.
Well, one of the things Joe Biden said last night was he spoke about the two documents of our democracy, talking about the Declaration of Independence and, of course, the Constitution. I wonder if he's read either one of them, because if he had, he would realize that the founders in the Declaration of Independence said that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all of us are created equal, endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That means that there is no such thing as an intrinsic worth of one person and a worthlessness of another.
That's right.
He shattered that last night. And then in the Constitution, we're clearly given the liberties of not only free speech and freedom of association and freedom of worship, but we're innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. We're subject to due process, not just to wild political accusations. And we also are protected against a government that's so big that it can come into our homes and just rifle through everything we have, looking for a way to criminalize us.
Right.
I wondered, has he read those documents?
Maybe at one time. I don't know if he still remembers what's in them. But the point is, today he's trying to back off what he said last night, saying, oh, I was only going after those people that said the election was false, that they didn't buy the results of the election. But in fact, what he said last night specifically was he pointed to policies that he happens to disagree with. Fine, he happens to disagree with some of these policies. He has different views on abortion. He has different views on this, that, and the other thing. But that doesn't mean that the people who have the other views are disloyal Americans. And again, it totally shatters his pullback today from what he said last night.
Well, and he lied about several things. When he said that MAGA Republicans are against people having contraceptives, where did he come up with that? That's not true. That is an outright lie. In some states, there's going to be more abortion than there ever has. I want to know, does he think it's a wonderful thing that some people in his party believe there should be no restrictions on abortion, even up to the moment of birth, and that you could dismember a completely whole and healthy baby inside the mother's womb for whatever reason you wanted without having to have a justification for it? That's a far cry from when Bill Clinton said abortion should be rare, legal, but available. I'm just thinking that this was just bizarre. And this whole idea about the election results, anybody who questions it, go to my Twitter account. I've retweeted from the RNC 10 minutes of Democrats, including Joe Biden, including Hillary and Jimmy Carter, saying that the election of 2016 was stolen and that Donald Trump was not a legitimate president. I mean, they can't have it both ways.
You know, they also missed talking about a lot of things. We had a graphic. We don't have it tonight, but we had a graphic of all the various things he didn't talk about, including inflation, including crime, including fentanyl, all of the things that have happened on his watch. Many would say his policies either encouraged or were responsible for what they happened. Here's what Senator Kennedy said earlier on Fox News about what he avoided saying. Roll tape.
He could have talked about crime, inflation, learning loss by our children, the mountains of fentanyl coming across the border, killing our teenagers. Instead, he chose to say to the American people, if you don't agree with me about higher taxes, more government, if you don't agree with me that moms are birthing people, if you don't agree with me that government has a constitutional right to talk to your 5-year-old about sexuality, you're a bad person and you're not even an American.
So is that what it was all about? Was just trying to divert voters from their biggest concerns, which is, how they're going to make a living and how they're going to walk down the street without getting mugged?
I have a hard time figuring out what his goal was. Maybe it was to distract the American people and to point everyone who voted for someone other than him as being un-American and an extremist. But I would say I'm an extremist for free speech. I'm an extremist for a secure border. I'm an extremist for protecting small business. What I saw in Joe Biden, and I'm calling this, and I think history will record it, as the speech that will be called the Get Off My Lawn speech by Joe Biden, because it was an angry old man screaming at the teleprompter with not a hint of optimism, not a hint of hope, not a hint of charity and kindness toward others. And I thought it was just absolutely unbecoming a sitting president. You don't even hear that kind of stuff in a campaign, but you certainly don't hear it for someone who is trying to represent that he's giving a presidential address that his own White House pretended was non-political.
A danger that we've all faced. I know you're a very nice guy. I remember when you were going after the Clintons, you said you didn't think low enough as in terms of their campaign style, what they were doing, and because of that, they pulled the rug out from you a number of times. But again, with this administration, I don't think people think low enough. And again, it might be a conspiracy in my own mind, but his focus on the elections, the upcoming elections, and suggesting that there's going to be Republican violence in the elections, which of course there really hasn't been a sign of, and if anything, it's been on the other side. But do you think maybe he's preparing the way for if Republicans have a blowout victory, they'll do exactly what they did in 2016 and say it was stolen?
Oh, I think there's no doubt that they'll do that. What I worry about is they'll continue to do what they have done, and that's burn police cars and set fire to courthouses, as they did all across the country in 2020. I think they'll further ignore when there is violence. The assassination attempt on Brett Kavanaugh, Joe Biden has yet to say a word about that or condemn it. When Steve Scalise was nearly murdered, when Rand Paul was nearly murdered, I don't remember Republicans saying that was representative of all the Democrats, even though the person who shot Steve Scalise was a Bernie supporter. We never held Bernie Sanders responsible for what some nut did, but Joe Biden holds the entirety of Donald Trump voters for something that maybe a handful of people have done. It's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah, his denial of that today notwithstanding. I mean, you go back, just read the speech. Luckily, we have the videotape.
Yeah.
I mean, he forgets that we have the videotape and we have the transcript. Mike Huckabee, great to see you. Have a wonderful long weekend. I hope it's a long one for you. Appreciate it.